it's really a shame that they don't make these kinds of movies anymore. I think the only one I saw this year that was like this was Sting, like the spider monster movie that had like a 10-year-old protagonist who was kind of the same way, who kind of was very independent, goes on adventures and that sort of thing. And back then, in our review of that, I said, like, this is a real throwback, like, to the 80s and 90s, where there were all sorts of movies like this. Just a child going on adventures, either with the adults gone or with the adults kind of ignoring them. Mm-hmm. And that has been out of fashion for a long time now. And watching this one, I kind of was reminded of that. And it also confirmed to me that I wasn't just nostalgic for this, right? Like, I grew up on movies like this. And so I remember them fondly. But with something like this, there's always a chance that, like, when you actually go back to revisit those movies, it doesn't quite hold up, right? It's something that you've grown out of or something, or that never was as good as you remember it. But this was just fun. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was just that kind of story that's just fun to watch.
You know what? I wonder why they don't create these type of stuff anymore. Is there a thing where I think you mentioned like people something about growing out of it, but it's like obviously it's new generation, new kids. Also, the new kids every day. So it's like, wouldn't they enjoy this, or do they need something that's a bit more mature or immature?
I mean, the movie industry always kind of goes in in extremes, right? Mm-hmm. Where they do only one thing for a long time, and then when there's pushback against it, then they never do that thing again until there's like a revival a generation later. And for some reason, somebody somewhere decided that these movies were no longer contemporary, and so nobody has done them, at least as far as I can tell, like in major like blockbuster releases and stuff like that. I don't know that there's any kind of thought behind it, that anybody has said, no, these movies are for one reason or another no longer appropriate or whatever. I have never seen anybody criticize those kinds of movies on that level, but it's just, we just don't do it. Like, for some reason, it just doesn't resonate.
I think you get quite a lot more of it in the animated movies. So things like Moana or Inside Out and things like that is where they've kind of like invested a little bit more of that for whatever reason. And again, it might just be the trend where they're kind of seeing that the modern kids are responding more to sort of these animated characters. Even though we did have ours back in the day as well, like your Toy Stories, etc. That we had as well. But it just seems like they've lent a little bit more into sort of the animated field, and I know when from speaking to my nieces and stuff like that, like they're super sort of kind of like big on that. And then there is a lot of not similarities, but some of the same things where you have the entertainment for the kids, but you also have some of that sort of kind of like mature themes that an adult that's taking the kids to go watch that movie can also sort of kind of pull from it as well. So it's not that it's I would say it's not that it's not there. It's just in a different medium in terms of sort of being animated as opposed to sort of having that live action side of things.
But then aimed specifically at children, right? As opposed to something like Home Alone or Goonies or something that was more aimed at everybody.
Yeah, which is yeah.
But I was going to say, isn't this slapstick? Because if this is slapstick, is that like, could that be do people still create slapstick stuff? Or if they don't, then that could be a reason.
I don't know, maybe, but we just have the child protagonist gone completely. Is the thing, and I'm not sure why that is.
Wait, no, is it? I'm sure there's like a child protagonist in many stuff. Like, of course, there's like Stranger Things. There's
But Stranger Things was explicitly an 80s throwback, and that was also 10 years ago. It comes up every once in a while, right? Like the Ghostbusters reboot has that a little bit, but that's still the entire family, right? Not specifically children going on adventures. I don't know, like I could theorize about how if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, you spent a lot of time just roaming your town and having adventures. And then when you grow up to be a writer somewhere, you told those kinds of stories. Whereas if you grew up in the 90s, 2000s, you didn't really have that experience, maybe. If you grew up with the internet, you had maybe a different kind of childhood, for example. And maybe that's why it doesn't come up. I have no idea if that's the explanation or not, but what I think is pretty clear is that it's just not a thing anymore.